Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Commander Crucible. Today we'll have 4 generals entering the Crucible. Randy will be piloting his Lord Windgrace deck, hoping to utilize his lands leaving and entering the battlefield. Tim is using his Dragon Tribal deck led by the Dragon to try and take to the skies and people's life totals. Rob is using Kaalia to outvalue his opponents in the early game with massive angels and demons and maybe a few dragons. Myself, I'm helming a Nicol Bolas the Ravager, based around graveyard control and recursion. Randy starts the game by playing a tapped Stomping Ground and passes to Tim. Tim plays a Prairie Stream tapped and passes to me. I play a Morphic Pool untapped because I have 2 or more opponents, and I pass to Rob, who plays a Westvale Abbey. Passes to Randy. Randy plays Boseiju, who shelters all, and it enters tapped, and passes to Tim. Tim plays a Glacial Fortress, and at this point we ask him if he's running an Azorius deck. He passes to me, and I play a Luxury Suite, entering untapped as I have 2 or more opponents, then casting a Felwar Stone and passing to Rob, who plays a Plains and then passes to Randy. Randy plays a Swamp, and in response, I quickly cast Vampiric Tutor and take 2 damage and search for a card to put to the top of my library. Randy then passes to Tim, who plays a tapped Cinder Glade. Randy admires the foil. Tim passes to me, and I quickly drop a Swamp. Pass to Rob, who plays a Mountain. In response to Rob playing his Mountain, I tap out to cast Wheel and Deal, to wheel all my opponents, and they draw 7 cards, as I only draw 1. Then I take a look at all graveyards, and with a new hand, Rob then drops Sword of the Animist and passes to Randy. Randy responds and casts his own Judge Foil Vampiric Tutor on Rob's end step and takes 2 damage as he tutors a card to the top of his library. Randy then taps out, using Boseiju to make the spell uncounterable, taking 2 damage. Casts Kodama's Reach to bring a swamp to the field and a forest to his hand. Tim then plays an untapped Dragonskull Summit and taps 2 mana to cast Prismatic Omen, making it so that his lands are every land type, and passes to me. I play a Swamp, then tap 2 mana to cast the Swiftfoot Boots. After looking through some graveyards, I tap 2 more mana to cast Dance of the Dead. Dance of the Dead is an older card, and it's a bit wordy, so I'll attempt to clarify. Simply put, Dance of the Dead is able to enchant a creature in a graveyard. That creature then gets brought to the battlefield under your control, but that creature is tapped and stays tapped. The creature does get a +1/+1. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay a colorless and a black to untap that creature. I use Dance of the Dead to target Tim's Maelstrom Archangel in his graveyard. The angel has flying, and says whenever the Maelstrom Archangel deals combat damage to an opponent, you may play a non-land card from your hand for free. I move to equip the Swiftfoot Boots onto the angel for 1 mana. Rob plays a Swamp. Taps all his mana, and then decides not to, and passes to Randy. Randy taps 3 mana to cast the Ramanamp Excavator. Then, for his land for turn, plays the Arcane Lighthouse from his graveyard. My Wheel and Deal earlier made Randy discard Anger, giving all his creatures haste, and decides to swing the Excavator at me, so I take 2. Tim plays Cavern of Souls for his land for turn, and I jokingly suggest that he should name Rob's Angels, but he names Dragons instead. Tim then taps out to cast the Hellkite Charger. Tim decides to swing the Hellkite Charger at me for 5 for taking his Angel. As Tim passes to me and I untap, I decide to pay the colorless and the black to untap the Angel. I move right to combat and swing at Randy for 6 in the air for hitting me with his Excavator. Randy then taps Boseiju to take 2, and another green mana to cast Constant Mist, which will fog all combat damage, and decides to sacrifice a swamp to return Constant Mist to his hand, effectively fogging all combat. I miss the Archangel trigger and do not get a free non-land permanent from my hand. I pass to Rob, who plays a Plains for his turn. Rob then taps out to cast his commander Kaalia, and being a true blue player, I bargain with him a little bit, saying that I won't counter his commander if he doesn't attack me with her. Randy drops a mountain for his turn. He then moves to cast his commander, Lord Windgrace, and hearing of me talking about a counterspell, he asks for any responses, to which I politely cast Dissolve and scry 1 off the top of my library. Randy then turns the Ramanamp Excavator sideways at Rob for not wanting Lord Windgrace to resolve. Randy passes to Tim. Tim taps out and casts the Dreamstone Hedron. Then taps his Dreamstone Hedron for a Commander Sphere. Once Tim goes to combat, he swings the Hellkite Charger at Rob for 5. Rob takes the 5 instead of blocking with Kaalia. Tim then passes to me. I pay the 2 mana to untap the Angel and play my first island of the game. I then cast Nicol Bolas the Ravager, making all my opponents discard a card. Rob discards the Rakdos Carnarium, Randy discards Life from the Loam, and Tim discards a Steam Vents. I move to combat and swing the Archangel at Randy once again, who takes the 6 damage, and I cast Grave Upheaval from my hand for free, and I target Rob's Runescarred Demon, and tutor for a card to my hand. Rob moves to equip the Sword of the Animist on Kaalia, giving her a +1/+1, and swings at Tim, dropping Rakdos with the Kaalia trigger. Tim takes the 9 damage and Rob goes to search for a land to put on the battlefield. He plays a Swamp, tapped, and passes to Randy. Randy then casts the Sky Shroud Claim, going to tutor in his library for 2 forest cards. Randy tutors an Overgrown Tomb to the field, along with a forest, paying the 2 to have it enter untapped. Then plays a mountain for his land for turn. Randy then casts Eternal Witness, bringing back Vampiric Tutor from his graveyard to his hand, and turns them sideways with Anger, swinging Eternal Witness at Tim and the Excavator at Rob. Then for 1 red, Randy casts Blasphemous Act, dealing 13 damage to all creatures on the battlefield, wiping the board. Tim casts Paradox Engine, which will allow him to untap all his non-land permanents whenever he casts a spell. Then plays Magus of the Moat, untapping his non-land permanents. I drop an island for turn. And tap all but 1 mana to cast the Locust God. After the Locust God is resolved, I tap the 1 to equip him with the Swiftfoot Boots. The Locust God has flying, so I move to attack Tim because I'm scared of his Paradox Engine. Tim takes the 4 and I pass to Rob. Rob plays a mountain for turn. Casts Blackblade Reforged, and then taps out the rest of his mana to cast his commander again, paying the extra 2, and passes to Randy. Randy then drops a forest for his turn, and taps 6 mana to cast Multani, and passes to Tim. Tim taps out to cast the Dragon, effectively untapping all his non-land permanents. Tim then casts Crucible of Fire, giving all his dragons +3/+3. When I draw a card for turn, I create an insect token, and I tap 5 mana to cast Gilded Lotus. I then move to combat and swing the Locust God at Rob for 4 damage. Rob then plays his Arid Mesa tapped for some reason and equips the Sword of the Animist and Blackblade Reforged to his commander, swinging her at Tim and using her trigger to drop Angel of Serenity, allowing him to exile 3 creatures on the battlefield or in graveyards. He exiles Multani, the Dragon, and the Utvara Hellkite from his own graveyard. Tim is quick to cast Mortify, killing the Angel and sending all the exiled cards back to their hands. Randy then agrees to help Tim out by casting Constant Mist in return for some protection. Randy sacrifices a forest to bring it back to his hand. Randy plays a Wooded Foothills as his land for turn, and takes 1, cracking it to find a forest or mountain to the battlefield. Randy then moves to cast Lord Windgrace again, paying the extra 2. I do not respond and counter it this time, but I think I'm being sly and cast Memory Plunder to try and target my own Wheel and Deal to wheel everyone's hands before Windgrace resolves. Memory Plunder only works on opponents' graveyards, so I sadly have to cast Utter End and target Timmy's Paradox Engine and exile it. Randy used Lord Windgrace -2 ability to bring back a mountain and Wooded Foothills, sacking it to go find a forest or mountain. Tim then plays Flooded Strand, cracking it and taking 1 to go find an island or plains. Tim casts the Dragon from his hand and passes to me. I draw a card, creating another Locust token, and then pay 4 mana to activate the Locust God's ability to draw a card, create a Locust, and then discard a card. I pay 4 more mana and activate his ability a second time. I then turn 2 Locusts sideways at Lord Windgrace to kill him, and I pass to Rob. Rob casts Behold the Beyond to discard his hand and tutor into his library for 3 cards, and that becomes his hand. He then swings at Randy with his newly tutored cards and drops Master of Cruelties with Kaalia's trigger. Randy casts Constant Mist from his hand, sacking a swamp to bring it back to his hand after it resolves, taking no combat damage from Kaalia, but still dropping to 1 health as the Master of Cruelties was not blocked. Randy cannot use Boseiju to make his spells uncounterable, as it would kill him, so he could not make the Constant Mist uncounterable. Randy then casts the Rampaging Baloths and passes to Tim. Tim casts the Spirit of Resistance, saying that if he controls a permanent of each color, he can no longer take damage. Tim then moves to combat, swinging the Dragon at Randy, drawing a card and dropping Kindred Discovery for free. Randy responds by casting Assassin's Trophy on the Dragon, allowing Timmy to search for a basic land. Tim passes to me, and as I draw, I create another Locust. I then tap 2 mana to cast Stitch Together, targeting Kess in my own graveyard. I have 7 or more cards in my graveyard, so Kess comes right back to the battlefield. I swing 3 Locusts at Randy, and the Locust God at Rob. Randy then moves to cast Constant Mist, making it uncounterable with Boseiju. I point out that if he uses Boseiju, he would kill himself, so he untaps and uses different mana, to which I politely counter Constant Mist with an Arcane Denial for some extra card draw for both of us. Randy is then knocked out of the game. After combat, I cast Vampiric Tutor from my graveyard with Kess, and take 2 damage to tutor for a card to the top of my library as Rob untaps. Rob then casts Archfiend of Despair and moves right to combat. He swings at Tim, dropping Gisela with Kaalia's trigger, for added insult to injury, dealing double damage. Tim is then knocked out of the game. I draw and forget to make my Locust token. Then I ask to peer into Rob's graveyard. I then use Kess to cast Memory Plunder, targeting Rob's Behold the Beyond, discarding my hand and tutoring for 3 cards that will become my hand. I first cast Terminate on Rob's Archfiend of Despair, then I cast Go for the Throat on his Master of Cruelties. I then move to combat, swinging the Locust God, Kess, and 3 hasty Locusts at Rob for 10. Rob untaps and swings all out at me, having no cards in hand. I block with 2 Locusts, taking no damage. Rob passes to me, I untap and draw, creating another Locust token. I then cast Hero's Downfall, targeting Gisela. I use the Locust God's draw ability to create another Locust and discard a card. I cast Go for the Throat from my graveyard with Kess. I then swing out at Rob using all my hasty tokens, the Locust God and Kess, leaving Rob at 1 life. Rob then untaps and taps out to cast Bruna, which brings back Gisela from his graveyard. Rob then equips the Blackblade Reforged to Gisela, and we realize that I have enough damage to take him out. Thank you for watching the Commander Crucible, and if you like what I'm trying to do here, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time,